Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it. How's everybody doing today? I can't make my Minnesota joke because they're like all in. I love that. We have a lot to talk about. I don't have a lot of time with you today, so my friends, I'm gonna run. I'm probably gonna sound like I'm trying to sell you a car, so I apologize for that, but I wanna try to get through some of the strategies and content today because I think they'll be valuable to you on day one. And I also wanna be clear that in a lot of things that I share today, they may not necessarily resonate in terms of what you can teach in the class, but the ideas behind them, at least the strategies, may be valuable to you as you're thinking about structuring next semester. What I want to talk about is we the people, public memory, identity, and the ongoing work of democracy. And I want to begin with this really phenomenal photograph that was taken in April of 1942, one of my favorite photographs of all time, taken by a photographer by the name of Dorothea Lange, who was engaged by the United States government to take these photographs to support the Japanese internment. Problem is, ain't nothing about that photograph that supports the Japanese internment. You guys follow me here? Dorothea Lange's task from the government was to document evidence of the fact that the argument being made about the potential danger associated with having an alien race within the US potentially could be damaging to national security. And she went out and she took this photograph, and this photograph by its very essence mocked the mission, the task that had been imparted to her. My friends, I love this also because what I love about this picture, particularly now, is it's this wonderful tapestry of diversity that particularly today is very powerful when people reminisce about what they imagine America was. And I'm like, well, here's a picture of what America was in 1942, and it's a picture of black kids, Mexican kids, Asian kids, white kids. Follow me here? Now, what Dorothea Lange did, and I want to share this with you very quickly because I'm going to talk about this strategy a little bit, is what I like to tell educators, what I call teach by proxy, comment by proximity. Because what she was able to do was to lance the argument being made about the Japanese, but she didn't have to do it in a frontal assault. She just did it by proximity and taking a photograph, which by its very, you guys follow where I'm going here? The other thing I want to share with you about this particular image is that I write a lot about Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson grew up in California in the 1920s and 1930s. Jackie Robinson went to or lived in a diverse neighborhood. He belonged to a group called the Pepper Street Gang. If you read Jack's autobiography, he talks about the Pepper Street Gang as being blacks, Mexicans, and Asians, all of whom were denied access to the pool except on Thursdays, which was Colored Kids Day. And then they would clean the pool and get it set for the white kids. They would literally clean the pool and get it set for the white kids for the other days of the week. What I love about that is that, and I love to remind people, those signs don't say black and white, they say colored. And this is also a picture, a photograph that documents when we put those segregation signs up, that wasn't just a black and white issue. That was an issue that was at its core about identity, belonging, citizenship, it's what Fannie Lou Hamer says when she sits down to offer her testimony. She goes, we wanted to register to vote to become first-class citizens. We were no-class citizens. Everybody follow me here? As were these young people in this photograph. I share that with you to get started because I want to begin with some conventional wisdom from three people that are really going to anchor our conversation today. And this question of we the people is a question of who belongs, who is remembered, and who gets to tell the story. Say that again. Who belongs, who is remembered, and who gets to tell the story. But for Dorothea Lange, we're not telling the story of those young people. Everybody follow me here? But for you as educators, in the way that Jessica talked about with you earlier, there are a lot of stories that would be left out. And so there's a lot of power that we have in that. And that conventional wisdom I want to share with you first begins with William Faulkner. The past is never dead. It's not even what? See, my friends, history doesn't repeat itself, it echoes. And those echoes are either invitations or they're indictments. They're invitations when we can think creatively about how we invite students into this discourse about this ongoing question, debate about who belongs, what is an American, what does we the people mean, what does the Declaration mean, did it extend beyond that moment, right? That's all there. It's an indictment when we pretend it doesn't exist and we walk away from it, or we don't have the courage to face it honestly in our classrooms. Number 2, and I really love this, James Baldwin. The world changes according to the way people see it. If you can alter even by a millimeter the way people look at reality, then you can change it. What I hope to do in the roughly 40 minutes that I have with you today is alter the way that you're thinking about this moment and what you'll do on day 1. But I want to be clear, what Dorothea Lange did was alter the way that people were thinking about reality because of the photograph that she took. And I want to be clear, the government never published the photos. They were like, damn it, no way. The same way they didn't publish a lot of photos taken by Gordon Parks, because he did the same thing. Gordon Parks said, the famous black photographer, the camera is a weapon. They never took it. But generations later, when those photographs were published by Ebony magazine in the midst of the civil rights movement, what Gordon Parks was able to document was the very thing that Fannie Lou Hamer was saying, this is generational, it's deep. When we look back at Dorothea Lange's photography from 1942, what we're able to say is that imagined America, you guys follow me here? Y'all a little quiet. I feel like I'm in Minnesota. My friends, this is important because it brings us to the third one, and it's Sandra Day O'Connor. I love when Justice O'Connor said, the practice of democracy is not transferred through the gene pool. It must be, help me, and anew by each of, she didn't say American, she said citizens. And I think this is interesting because it's drawing us back into this discourse about who belongs, right? What I also love about this is that she called democracy a what? P word. See, my friends, I want to be clear because I teach in a law school and I have to remind my law students, my first-year law students, that law is a practice. But I also like to remind them, because I had 3 heart procedures in 4 years, medicine also a damn practice. Otherwise, people have a medical, if not, I would have had 1 heart surgery in 3 years, right? It would be called the perfect. I would prefer that it be called the perfect. But by this, it means that it invites those who participate to have responsibilities and things that they need to do in order to make it work. And I share those 3 as our anchors, in particular, because if I go back to that Dorothea Lange photograph for just a second, and I talked about this, she literally, with her camera, was changing the way that people saw the world. And I would argue, Jessica shared it with you, this has been the focus of the last 3 days, this is why we do what we do. We have tremendous power to change the way that young people think. I want to be clear, Jessica talked about it with you this way, it'll come up in my presentation in just a minute. But people say teachers are superheroes. You're not superheroes, you're first responders. I want to be clear what I mean by that, because whenever anything goes wrong in the world, we spend more time with your kids than anyone. And when they have questions and they sit down in front of us, and we used to have a deep respect for the educators who had the responsibility of helping young people navigate some of the most momentous things that we've lived through as a society and a culture. I was in front of students on 9/11. I was in front of students during Hurricane Katrina. I was sitting in the classroom when the Challenger came down. Teachers are first responders. My friends, I share that with you because if I take that photograph and then I put it up against the primary source, so you're bringing me a new mic, thank you.
Sorry.
It's like a Whitney Houston moment.
I
know. Somebody give Bobby Brown a new mic. Testing 1, 2, 3. There we go, that's much better. It's nice to see there's some new addition. It's like one person, you really got it, I love that. Okay, Ricky Bell. All right, follow me here, my friends. If we put that photo up with a primary source like Gordon Hirabashi, I want you to see how this is going. Because if I'm teaching those Japanese, if I'm elementary and I want to use that photograph, I'm golden. If I'm middle and high school and I want to incorporate a document, now I put Gordon Hirabashi in. As an American what? I wanted to uphold the principles of the Constitution, and the curfew and evacuation orders which singled out a group on the basis of ethnicity violated them. It was not acceptably less than a full in a and what I'm looking at here, my friends, and I just want to go back to this picture for just a second, is a classroom full of young people in 1942 who didn't feel like they were citizens. Anybody follow me here? Who felt like they were alienated or isolated and I wanted to do that with you in particular because when I go back to Gordon Hirabashi, he says, I wasn't looking for a cause. In fact, I was preparing to, but in the days before I was supposed to leave, I realized that I couldn't do it. What I love about it, it's authentically human in the way that Jessica shared with us. It's a primary source in which Gordon Hirabashi is being very human about what makes people, what makes history. See, my friends, John Lewis wrote this really powerful piece before he died that was published in the New York Times posthumously. Together we can redeem the soul of America. And everybody quotes the part where John Lewis says, by getting in good trouble, necessary trouble. But here's my problem. You gotta read the whole damn thing. Because what John Lewis wrote in that piece is, ordinary people with extraordinary vision. I wanna say this again. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision have the power to redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And then he goes on to say that the first step in that is studying the past. Because he said, so as history teachers, he gave us a gift. If I were teaching this year, I might even go in and say, you know what we're gonna do to anchor our class? We're gonna read John Lewis. Because the enterprise that he lays out in 2020 is something we're still navigating today, but it didn't begin in 2020. It began right here in the cobblestone streets of Williamsburg. Follow me? My friends, I love this because by the time we get to Hirabashi at the very end, but then I thought, if I couldn't accept the curfew, how can I accept this thing? It's even worse. I'm not going to allow my, help me, to be usurped without my ordinary person with extraordinary vision. We remember him not because he was superhuman. We remember him because he acted. He's in conversation with Rosa Parks, and both of them are inspired and animated by the language of the Declaration of Independence, which you have been interrogating. And look, we hold these truths to be self-evident. But wait a minute, we weren't talking about you. But it doesn't matter because I interpret it to be about me, and so therefore I'm going to act accordingly. We all on the same page? Good. Y'all very Minnesota. I feel like I'm home, Jessica. What's going on? He concludes, I'm going to stand up for my rights. Immediately I knew I couldn't. And why I love it is now he's in conversation with Rosa Parks or Homer Plessy or insert name here. My friends, we spend a lot of time talking about how to connect the dots, but I also like to do this with music. See, I was just with some educators down in Montgomery, Alabama, and we were talking about, because we're in Montgomery, my favorite song of all time, Sweet Home Alabama. Now, I want to be very clear. Sweet Home Alabama is a little problematic for me in some ways. But when it comes on, I like when it comes on, and I want to share this with you. In 1970, Neil Young challenged the South's legacy of racism in a pair of songs, Southern Man, and again in 1972 with Alabama. A year later, Leonard Skinner answered him in Sweet Home Alabama. Why do I love this? Because there's a conversation happening in the music that I don't think my students are aware of, and I just like to let them know that long before Drake and Kendrick were it might have taken a little longer back then, but they were also answering each other. But the subject matter in 1974 is about the legacy of the South and about history. Everybody follow me here? Because Leonard Skinner felt indicted by what Neil Young had done. And so when they come out with their song, and I want to go here very quickly, together, these songs reveal that history is never just about, as Jessica said, the past. It's about a conversation about identity, memory, and belonging. Because they were like, Neil Young, who the hell are you from Canada to tell us? Everybody follow me here? Last part. And every nation must decide whether it will help me, the stories that shaped it, or simply defend them. Because that's the moment in 74. They got called out. They responded by saying, they not like us. Kidding. Follow me here. Glad I wore my rubber-soled shoes, Jessica. This actually helped. I love this because it's a great teach by proxy in this way. Neil Young is going through this process, and the lesson is it's easy to see injustice somewhere else. It's hard to recognize the echoes at. I'm going to demonstrate this for you in two ways because this is a great teach by proxy. When Southern Man comes out, Sweet Home Alabama, isn't just a response to Neil Young, it's a conversation about history, memory, and identity. Rather than denying the South's painful past, Ronnie Von Zant wrestles with it, pushing back against the outsiders while embracing a complicated regional pride. It's all in the song. In fact, if I were in a classroom this year, I might begin the year by playing Sweet Home Alabama and saying, what America's being contested? What is Ronnie Von Zant defending? Everybody from me? What's he grappling with, right? Would he embrace the word enslaved? Or would that be problematic in the sense of defending what? I love this because it's really powerful. He goes, the song reminds us, the The song reminds us that history is really a choice between pride and shame. More often, it asks us to hold both at once. See why I love this for 250? Because if you're not going to deal with the shame, don't get to the pride part, because the pride part doesn't work without the shame. That's what the process of becoming is. Ready, follow me here? It doesn't work otherwise. I love this part. Ronnie Von Slant couldn't escape his region's violence, its shame, its contradictions, and neither could the song, or it wouldn't have been authentic. Why do we love it so much? Because the minute it comes on, it transports you back in that place. You start listening to the lyrics, and like a lot of other pieces of music that have become standards, they have that same power. They play with the same emotions. Everybody follow me here? Last part. Sweet Home Alabama is more than a reply to Neil Young. It's an attempt to negotiate what it means to love a place without denying its past. Can we say that together? Because it's America 250, and I think we're going to spend most of the year trying to navigate exactly what's in that sentence. And if we're not navigating it, guess what? The young people who sit out in front of us that look like, for many of you, that classroom from 1942 of diverse faces who are going, what the hell is happening now, are navigating those questions. Everybody follow me? I'm going to stop asking if you follow me. It's clear you're not paying attention to me, but I'm going to keep talking. Follow me here. I love this. Very important. And this is my favorite part. Sweet Home Alabama, then, if we look at it, is bringing us to this penultimate point that history rarely asks us to choose between pride and regret. More often, it asks us to live honestly with. So there were some Canadian teachers in the room, and I wanted to poke fun at them because they were all proud of Neil Young and the Guess Who, and I said, hold up. Because this is the whole thing about what? Canadians often contrasted themselves with American racists, yet Indigenous communities and Black Canadians experienced discrimination that was too often ignored. And I shared with them from the 1920s this wonderful, problematic primary source. White Canada, men of Canada, it's your name of the, is your name on the voters list? If not, get on it at once. If you're over 21 years of age, a British subject can have been 6 months in the province of British Columbia, 1 month in advance of Vancouver. It's your duty to exercise your right as a citizen and to vote, to deny. Everybody understand where this is going because it's taking place and I need my young people then to understand in the same way that John Lewis talked about in that same piece from 2020. He said, you can't just study American history, you have to study global history because humanity's been involved in this, and I'm quoting him, soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. Because if it's not global, then you're not able to connect the dots that, well, these ideas that are percolating here may have begun someplace else, but eventually they catch up and the world suffers from. Last part of this is very important. It's a teaching question for you. When you teach someone else's history, do we help students recognize themselves or simply reassure them that the injustice happened somewhere else? So that's the easy part. The Nazis, put it over here. Everybody follow me here? The slave trade, put it over here, compartmentalize it. Rather than asking the harder question, are we looking back at ourselves and interrogating what Faulkner, what Sandra Day O'Connor, and what James Baldwin asked us to reflect on? When the lights go out in Georgia, you gotta be careful. Follow me here, it's very important. I love this. Every nation has stories that it celebrates and stories that it what? My point in bringing up Canada, because then all the other, some of my American teachers were happy, like, thank you for getting them too. And I was like, that wasn't my point. My point was to say, every nation has stories that it celebrates and it. Every state has stories that it celebrates. Every city, every community, every school, every church, every family has stories that it celebrates. You went straight for the negative. Lillian's like, I'm not even going to give you anything positive. She's like, let's just talk about the stuff we hide. America 250 is more than an opportunity to celebrate our history. It's an invitation. Remember, we talked about invitations and indictments. To teach stories our nation has worked hardest to forget. That's powerful, right? To be in that terrain, in that territory, in that space that Ronnie Von Zant is navigating when he goes, I'm going to put this diss track together for Neil Young. In the same way that Kendrick had buyer's remorse after he went after Drake and said, maybe I shouldn't have said those things because I realized that what I said might have scored points against you, but in 10 years, this may not sit well, may not age well. And why am I saying it that way? Because I want my young people my students to understand that that's the human enterprise. That's why we call it the humanities, that echoes in our contemporary moment. I love this last part. The measure of this anniversary will not be how well we retell the familiar narrative, but whether we have the courage to recover the voices and experiences too often left at its margins. It's a little bit of what I call fugitive pedagogy. I'm stealing that from my colleague, Professor Williams. That reminds us that the most transformative lessons have often been the ones someone hoped we would never be taught. Let America 250 be the moment that we teach them anyway. In fact, when I walked in today with my friend Jessica, and I was like, I'm cold. And then I walked over here and somebody wrote how many indigenous languages were spoken, and after without a language, and they said, and I'm gonna teach it anyway. And I said, I'm warm. I love that. My friends, I share that with you because being from Minnesota, I want to tell you a contemporary story. A couple years ago, there was this thing happening called the Olympics. There was this gymnast called Suni Lee. Do you remember her? And she won a gold medal, and she was really excited. And Suni Lee won the gold medal, and they draped her in the American flag, and they put the stuff on her, and they were like, Suni Lee, tell us how great it was. And Suni Lee, in that moment, some people felt like took a shot. I don't think she took a shot. She kind of said what echoes what Muhammad Ali said when he won a gold medal for the United States in the 1960s, and then said, I won a gold medal and I can't eat a hamburger at home, and I don't know why anybody else can't see the contradictions, but I just won a gold medal for you, so I'm gonna name it. Everybody follow me here? What Suni Lee said that got her in a little bit of hot water. She said, I'm a Hmong American who was born and raised in, I grew up in, the Twin Cities has the largest urban population in the nation, and yet to this day I run into people who have no idea why the Hmong are even in the United States. They have no idea of the role that we played in. So what I love about this, my friends, is that some people are like, well, that's an indictment on the teachers. I was like, oh, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's an indictment on all of us, but it's also an invitation for us to think about what Suni Lee is telling us about what's not reflected in the curriculum. Everybody follow me here? This is important in this sense because if I think about Suni Lee in this regard, and I talk about her very quickly, I want to tell you my personal story of the Challenger. And I want to tell you this story in relationship to something that Jessica and I experienced together. A couple of years ago, there was supposed to be a professional development in Florida, and it was supposed to be on civil rights movement. And then what happened is they were looking through the materials that were supposed to be a part of that professional development, and they discovered a picture of Colin Kaepernick kneeling and a picture of demonstrators during the 1950s and 1960s at lunch counters. And they called into question whether that was political. And so the teacher who was supposed to be the cooperating teacher for that was asked to remove those materials. That teacher wouldn't do it. And so then the university professor who was accompanying that decided that he was going to make a statement about this, and it kind of blew up. And all of a sudden, we're on the national news, there's all these problems, and I get a call from my friend Jessica. Jessica's like, Yohuru, do you mind going down to Florida to pick up and be part of this PD? And I said, let me get this straight. They don't want documents from the civil, because I'm a civil rights historian, that's what I do, right? She goes, yeah, but you can navigate this. Let me get this straight. And they're uncomfortable and they want pre-censorship because I don't do pre-censorship. He goes, yeah, but you can navigate this. So I said, I have 3 rules, 3 things that I want, 3 things that I need. Number 1, no pre-censorship of my materials to Florida. They go, we don't know if we could do that. I don't know if we could do. Okay, no pre-censorship of your materials. Ace. Number 2, what do you want? I want the whole day. The whole day, we've never done that before. You can't have the whole day. What are you going to talk about for the whole day? I get the whole day. No learning specialist, no cooperating. No, I get the whole damn day. Can't do it, can't come. You got the whole day. 2 for 2. What else do you want? I fly first class. Absolutely. Guess which one I didn't get? My friends, I want to tell you, I walked into this room a lot like this, and there's a line of administrators in the back of the room. Because everybody wants to know what Yohuru Rashid Williams, who writes about the Black Panthers, is going to say about civil rights and sanitized history. And I begin because it was the anniversary of Challenger. And so I started here with them. You know, it literally was the day before, it's January 27th. I want you to take a look at an image with me from that moment, because whenever we teach Challenger, we teach it as a moment of tragedy. but I want to alter the way that we're thinking about that moment. I want to Dorothea Lange Scooby-Doo this. I want you to take a look at this picture, because my friends, that's a hell of a portrait of America in 1986. It's a complete recast of the way that we teach and think about that moment. Because the interesting thing about that is a hell of a portrait of diversity in a moment that most people don't associate with diversity. It's a hell of a statement about identity, belonging, inclusivity in the midst of a tragedy we often don't talk about in that context. And what I love about this is that if I gave you the individual histories of each one of those astronauts, just very quickly, Ellison Onizuka. Actually, let me go back. Ronald McNair, descendant of sharecroppers and the enslaved. The McNair Scholars Program that many universities run today is a direct legacy of Ronald McNair. I love that story. Ellison Onizuka, first Asian American and the first person of Japanese origin to reach space. He credited Hawaii's public schools for steering him toward a career as an astronaut, and he often visited those schools to encourage students to set goals and work hard to achieve them. I love that because you know what? Educators are always in the mix. Love that story, and I'm gonna go back because everybody knows Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher in space. The story I love to tell about Krista McAuliffe is that was my freshman year of high school. I remember being upset because there was actually gonna be a teacher in space and I was gonna get to be a part of that lesson. Those of you who are old enough remember, this was a big deal. Credit to the Reagan administration, because people love to say, we're about to hear this liberal professor. And I was like, I mentioned Sandra Day O'Connor and Ronald Reagan positively already. How could you be mad at me? Anyway, I'll never forget this. The Reagan administration had pressure from all kinds of groups and individuals who wanted to be, you had entertainers, John Glenn wanted to go back. The Reagan administration said, we're gonna democratize access to information. The first civilian in space should be a teacher. God, I love that. Follow me? The first civilian in space should be a teacher, and they should teach a lesson that makes access to what we've uncovered in that space available to, and I was in high school and I was like, that's messed up. My friends, what's powerful about this is you also get Judith Resnick. People don't know about Judith Resnick. She's the fourth woman in space. She was also of Ukrainian Jewish ancestry. So you're getting the story of America through, and then you get the guys who get dismissed as the three white guys, but the reality is, two of them were very vocal about their immigrant connectivity. You guys follow me here? It's a hell of a portrait of Challenger. Let me do this very quickly because I'm running out of time. I remember when Challenger went down because we were in school and they suspended class and we were all sitting in the lunchroom in the auditorium to watch the Challenger go up. And I want to be clear, my friends, when it came down, 57 seconds into flight, you know who was sitting there to help us navigate that? You. You. Us. But I'll tell you something else about that moment. That night, Ronald Reagan was prepared to deliver the State of the Union. It was completely divorced from the Challenger mission. And he goes to his speechwriter, Peggy Noonan, and he says to Peggy, I need to address what happened today because there were literally the nation's young people were watching. I want to say this again because it's a hell of a story about leadership. That the President of the United States in 1986, Ronald Reagan said, I need to talk to young people about what it is they just saw because this potentially could be traumatizing and damaging to them long term because this might undermine their faith in not only the space program, but their nation if we don't in some substantive way address it. And so Ronald Reagan and Peggy Noonan craft the first American presidential address in history to talk directly to students. What does Ronald Reagan say in that address? Got to read this to you because it's powerful. Echoes. Reagan begins, ladies and gentlemen, I plan to speak to you tonight to report on the State of the Union, but the events of earlier today have led me to change those plans. Today is a day of help me. Today is a day of navigating. Everybody follow me here? Today is a day of being in the discomfort of pride and shame. What the hell went wrong? And what can we celebrate? And how do we pick up the pieces? Reagan continues. We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. He said that in 1986, but I love it today because, wow, Mr. President, you wouldn't even recognize today Everybody follow me here? Technology in the moment in which it's introduced, I'm talking to teachers. Why am I telling you this? You know this. But in the moment it's introduced, it seems so, well, how would we ever, I remember back in the day, I like you, I send you a tape. Do you like me? Listen to the songs in order. Then it became a CD. I'm like, how will I ever tell a girl I like her anymore? Now it's an MP3 and now everything's on my phone. I gotta go up and talk to you. Or Snap. Follow me here, my friends. Very, very powerful. I love this. He continues. But for 25 years, the US space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space. Perhaps we forgot we're only just begun. We're still what? Problematic language, but I love it because if I am teaching a unit, it's my callback. When did we talk about pioneers before? And what were they? Follow me here. Don't have time, I'm gonna run. He continues. We're still pioneers. The members of the Challenger crew were pioneers. I wanna say something to the who of America who are watching the footage of the space shuttles take off. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this, it's all part of the process of It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to it belongs to the Challenger was pulling us into the future and we will continue to follow them. This is the part that really resonated with the audience and really where I wanted to stick them. Because Ronald Reagan said in 1986, we don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. So allow me to say to those people who want to take those documents out of that packet, who want to sanitize history, allow me to quote Ronald Reagan. We don't No, y'all think I said that. No, I'm banned from the state of Florida. My pictures at the entrance of Disney World, seen him. Do you guys understand where I'm going with this? Makes sense? You see, I'm sharing all that with you. I go to Reagan because if I run very quickly, we can't run from our history, but I'm gonna do some connectivity with you. If this is not partisan, go back to the moment that Kennedy commits the US to a space program. What does Kennedy say during the moon speech? We quote speeches sometimes selectively. That when we talk about Reagan's Challenger speech, we always go to the part where he says, the astronauts slipped the surly bonds of Earth to touch the face of God. It's beautiful. That ain't the most important part of the speech. It's like John Lewis is further up. And with Kennedy in 63, well, does Rice pray Texas? No, the most important part of the speech is here. Kennedy, September 1962. There is no strife, no prejudice, no what? In outer space as? Oh, trust me, my friends, if I were in a classroom today, the mileage I would get out of that, given. Listen to Kennedy. Its hazards are hostile to us. Its conquest deserves the best of all. And the opportunity for may never come again. Now, just like Reagan, there's a lot of text in there that's just dripping with connectivity and interpretation that I could have fun with, but I'm not going to do that with you now because conquest and pioneers don't quite sit well with me after we just talked about indigenous schools. Follow me here? But the reality is that that's the language. Follow me. The vision that John Kennedy is laying out here is one for international cooperation and peace. The reality has been something very different. My friends, I want to share this with you because sometimes art imitates life, sometimes life imitates art, sometimes you get art for art's sake. 4 years after Kennedy gives that speech, and almost 30 years before the Challenger photograph that I said, that's a hell of a picture of America. That is Gene Roddenberry's portrait of Star Trek 1966. Now, if I had time and this was a different kind of presentation, I would read to you from a memo from Mort Werner from NBC from September of 1966, in which Mort Werner says to Gene Roddenberry, hey, we're making diversity shows now. And if you don't have a diverse cast, we probably won't air your show. Why am I sharing that with you? Because Roddenberry likes to tell the story that he had this grand vision for Star Trek that was always going to be, but no, the reality is there was a policy in place at NBC because they recognized recognize a demographic change, and they said, we're losing market share, and so therefore we need to be much more expansive in the way that we're thinking about our audience, and it just happened to coincide with this great idea that this guy Roddenberry had for his show about space, where people would have to come together and cooperate in the way that Kennedy talked about. You guys get where I'm going here? I'm working awful hard for you people. I know you've been here for 4 days. I know you don't love me. I know you wait for lunch. You got to work with me, though. We're almost done. I love this picture because if I put this up with students and I put it up against Challenger 1986 or Dorothea Lange 1942, can you say that louder for everybody? I'm sorry.
George Takei was in a camp. He was in prison. He was in a camp.
George Takei was in a camp in Arkansas. My friends, I want to share this with you because what Gene Roddenberry says is very hopeful. I often get accused, well, people say this all the time, everything that you talk about is negative. I say, there's a lot of hope in what I shared if you're paying attention. Gene Roddenberry says, we must remember that the promise of tomorrow will not be easily fulfilled. The collective commitment of our nations, as well as the vision and wisdom and hard work of many, many what? Will be required to bring our dreams to fruition. In a way, the enterprise and the optimistic future in which it exists might be thought of as a reminder of what we can achieve if we try. I love this because in that moment, they're leaning into diversity as a strength. They're defining we the people in the broadest frame. Ready, follow me here? Now, I got to do the harder work now. And that is to talk about when this doesn't work. But before I go there, I want to go here to 1994. Article in the New York Times, editorial, where this guy is upset about the space program, and he goes, we spent all this money to put a man on the moon, and it was a short-sighted nationalistic challenge to the Soviet Union, so Kennedy could prove himself strong, and we lost long-term interest in space, and it got us nowhere. I disagree. It got us here, and that's pretty important. That's pretty important. And so is this. Follow me here, my friends, because that photo that Dorothea Lange took from 1942, just play this game with me. The Constitution begins with 3 words. We, the. For nearly 250 years, Americans have debated we the people questions. Who is, who gets to. If I didn't do it, you don't have to lie to me, but what I hope I just modeled for you over the last 30 minutes is exactly what we've been talking about. I did it through music, I did it with primary sources, I did it with cartoons, I did it with photographs. I'm just modeling for you what it looks like to ask that question in a way that then I'm not bound by, well, I'm covering the early national period, and so therefore I can't jump ahead. The hell, you can't jump ahead, you should. Make those connections and put that up on your wall. We the people, what are we going to be interrogating this year? What are we going to be looking at? What questions are we going to be asking about belonging? So if Sacagawea doesn't fit, you guys follow me here? But I want to establish that earlier because by the time we get down to that Native woman's diary from 1921, we are resurrecting that Sacagawea question in a way that is pertinent and pressing and important and connective. My friends, don't lose me here because at the end, the work of civic education is not to settle these questions once and for all. It's to equip students to engage them thoughtfully, honestly, and most importantly, because see, my friends, America's always been brown. Some of y'all get that, some of you won't. But I remember this from the last discovery of America, Richard Rodriguez from 2002. What I loved about it. Richard Rodriguez says, see, America's never fit neatly into a black-white binary. And when we do that, what we end up doing is losing the complexity and the power of people recognizing in those complicated stories themselves. 14th Amendment is not about me. 14th Amendment was about black folks in the Civil War. Birthright citizenship is in the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment is about you. It's about all of us. Due process of law is about all of us. Equal protection of the law is about all of us. 14th Amendment could be your roadmap for an entire interrogation of what it means to be or not to be included in the language we the people. What protections you have or what protections you lack because you don't find yourself in that language. My friends, I want to be very clear that when we teach by proximity, then all of a sudden, I'm not going to center the usual suspects that we see at the March on Washington. Why not, Dr. Williams? Because I'm going to do the same thing that Eyes on the Prize did when they emphasized the fact that they didn't cut away from Dr. King, they cut away from Fannie Lou Hamer. No one's going to cut away from me reading the I Have a Dream speech. They might cut away from the part where I go, did you know that there was a large contingent of Japanese and Asian Americans at the March on Washington and Puerto Ricans? Why are they there? Because the issues that are being presented around economic justice and race are issues that impact them. They're 14th Amendment bedrock. Who are the people, who participates, who's included, who is not? Questions. What I love about this is that these individuals understood, and I want to point to this because this is, what, how many years after the Japanese internment? How many years after George Takei is in that camp in Arkansas? We march for higher minimum wages for all workers. We demand decent housing now. Mike Masoka and his organization are there for that reason, as are Puerto Ricans in that moment. I want to tell it through that lens because I might have some student in my class who goes, here we go with the Black history again, and they don't see themselves in the lens, in the frame of the language, in the invitation. Not the indictment, the invitation. Don't lose me here because I'm running out of time. In fact, I'm probably out of time, but I don't care. I was in Montgomery with Mr. Charles Malden. Charles Malden marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge when he was 17 years old. What I loved about being in Montgomery with Mr. Malden was, a few months ago, ProPublica did an article on what was happening in Minnesota with the children in Operation Metro Surge, and they interviewed Charles Malden. People said, well, why are they talking to him? Charles Malden said, what I see happening in Minnesota with those young kids being tear gassed is exactly what happened to us during the civil rights movement. In fact, I want to go back to Faulkner. The past is never dead, it's not even the what? Here's what ProPublica wrote. We reached out to Malden because we recently published an investigation that found that 79 children have been physically harmed, right? The children include a 6-month-old baby. They were mostly going about their days when they were exposed to the tear gas or pepper spray. Malden gives us incredible interviews, but my favorite part of it is between the lines that a lot of people didn't catch. Charles Malden said, I want to be clear. You can make that connection. It's a great teach by proxy, my language. But he says, there's a subtle difference. These young people were collateral damage. We were running into the tear gas. We chose that because, like Gordon Hirabashi, we said, if the choice is between full citizenship and no class citizenship, we choose to go into the gas. Everybody follow me here? Good, because I'm definitely out of time. I want to run here with you very quickly. So here's your charge for 250. Number one, I want you to teach complexity, not simplicity. I didn't do it well today. I don't have a lot of time with you. Stop crowding me. It's hot in here. Some of you are Drake fans. That's the problem. Anyway, follow me. Help students see that America's story is what? Layered and shaped by many voices, not a single settled narrative. I bet you I just talked about civil rights in a way that 90% of people would not present their conversation about the civil rights movement. And it's the same content. It's why I teach 1927 Gong Lum versus Rice versus Plessy versus Ferguson used to drive my colleagues crazy. Like, why, you don't teach Plessy? I was like, I do teach Plessy. I teach Plessy through Gong Lum. If you don't know the Gong Lum case, 1927, a young girl by the name of Martha Lum is living in Rosedale, Mississippi, Rosedale Consolidated School. First day of school, she goes to school, and she arrives, and she gets through first period, no problem, second period, no problem, third period, no problem, fourth period, her principal her teacher says, you got to go down to the principal's office. She gets down to the principal's office, and the principal announces to her, Miss Lum, gather your things, you're going home. And Martha says, sir? The principal repeats, gather your things, you're going home. But sir, what have I done? My parents, they're going to have questions, what have I done? I need to tell my parents something. Never you mind, Miss Lum, gather your things, you're going home. And she becomes more insistent because her parents own a small grocery, and they've worked incredibly hard in this community, and she knows that her parents are going to be angry, and they're going to want an accounting for why she was saying, sir, please, I have to tell my parents. Never you mind, Miss Lum. If your father or mother have questions, have them see me in the morning, but you must go. And so Martha goes home, and she does that long wait that some of you badasses in this room remember, when you did something wrong at school, and you're waiting for your parents to get home. And the grocery doesn't close till 9 o'clock, and then they have to clean up, and they don't get home till a little after 9, and when they come in, they immediately set upon her with the good cop, bad cop routine. Her mother first. What have you done? Please tell us so we can go and make amends to the principal, and perhaps they'll readmit you. I've done nothing, mother. Then her father, you disgraced us. I've worked so hard in this community, one day in school, and you in that day have disgraced us. I did nothing, father, nothing. And so the next day, Mr. Lum goes to the Rosedale Consolidated School to see the principal, and he says, I demand to know why my child was sent home yesterday. And the Rosedale principal responds, because, sir, in the great state of Mississippi, we have laws governing the races. We have schools for the white and schools for the colored, and your child is colored. That's why so many states changed their definition of colored in 1927. Mississippi, Kentucky, Georgia. That's why I don't teach Plessy, because the students that I was sitting across from, I'm going to get Plessy by talking about that, but the community that I was teaching in front of needed to see it through the lens. Everybody follow me here? Look, number 2, invite students into the conversation. Maybe I didn't do it well today, but I hope you can see how I'm inviting them in by the choices that I make. Teach the Founding Ideals is a living democratic project empowering students to see themselves not just learners of history, but as authors of its what? Number 3, expand the circle of we the people. And I want to say something to you because I'm definitely going to run out of time here. I'm going to skip this. I need you to teach in color. What do you mean by that, Dr. Williams? What do you mean by teach in color? So many of the photographs that we use are in black and white, and that invites students to see them as this kind of distant past. So I love this picture that I had up here. These are civil rights demonstrators, but it looks like it could have been yesterday. That's Selma 1966. The police cars give it away, but not that one. Everybody follow me here? When I was a kid, there was a show called Batman. It used to say in color. And the cool thing about that, because it came out in 1966, same time as Star Trek, actually. It came out in November. Star Trek is September. The cool thing about that is if you had a black and white TV, you really weren't seeing the richness of what was presented in the show, that the Joker actually was wearing purple, right? Before Prince. So it was important for people to see it in color if you didn't see it in color. But when we talk about teaching color, this is what I'm looking for. Number 1, don't let black and white images turn history into a black and white story. Do you understand me? We on the same page? We playing together? Good. Number 2, remind students that history was lived by real people, not distant figures. Because you know who's real for me? Dorothea Lange is real for me. The photographer that made a choice to take, you know who's also real for me? Every one of those students in that picture, if I can send my students in the way that you did, which was brilliant, in the search of Lloyd Gaines, and I go send my students in search of those young people in that picture. In the same way that Jessica demonstrated for us. Number 3, make history feel, help me, and I love that picture of Martin Luther King and Coretta, but that's a picture from the 4th of July. Remember in the DC Metro? You know what that reminds me of? Elizabeth Eckford. Teach by proxy, comment by proximity. I don't ever have to go in and talk about that, but if I put Elizabeth Eckford up and I ask questions, how do you think she must have felt? Do you feel she felt isolated? What was the community communicating to her about her sense of belonging in that moment, her access to this place of public accommodation? Don't ever have to put that up, but then later on, I guarantee some student in the class, because this is what kids do, you teach them, they raise their hand and go, that's just like it. I go, I didn't bring that up, but since you brought it up, let's talk about it. I'd be all Montel Williams over that. All Sally, Jesse, Raphael. Follow me. Number 4, reveal the between. Help students recognize the past is not over, it is the. And bring the past close enough for students to see themselves. This is Rachel Karuma. She was one of those kids that was photographed by Dorothea Lange. This is Rachel Karuma. She was one of those, but now she's my grandmother, my auntie, my neighbor. You guys follow where I'm going here? And if I teach in color, I can help my students really be in the moment to see that. Because I'm running out of time, I'm going to run through the next ones very fast. I have 8 minutes to do this, so apologize to you, but you can ask me questions. I also will make a copy of this PowerPoint available to you, but do not post it. And if you do not put my name on it. I have enough hate mail. Okay, what I want to do here very quickly is number 1, ask these questions in a way which, I'm going to do political cartoons. This one came out in 2017, the United States Civil War, 1861 to left blank. I love this cartoon. Because have we not been, if we frame it as a 14th Amendment, talking about Civil War issues this entire day so far? And are those Civil War issues not, by their very nature, American Revolution issues? Because Jefferson, as much as we love him and celebrate him, didn't deal with it in a substantive way. And notes, he talked about it in Notes on Virginia. He's grappling it with, that's his sweet home Alabama. But in the official communication, just like in Ain't I a Woman, he dressed it up. You guys follow where I'm going here? I got to go back to this one, because again, I would be teaching this year. Because that question of, people automatically say, well, you're teaching immigration, that's controversial, that's divisive. No, I'm teaching the young people, this is your birthright. This thing we call the Constitution. It's actually very important if we spent the year interrogating what that means. What does that mean? My friends, I don't want to run out of time on you, but I already did. So I want to be clear. John Samash, legal scholar, says, American democracy rests upon faith in a civil theology. If you're a church, you quote John 3:16, but in the US, we quote very specifically, not Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution, the aspirational values that you find in the Declaration and the Preamble. Why? Because you can drive a truck through them, but those are the things that unite us as Americans. You guys follow me here? In fact, if I were to say this to you and we think about it in this context, this is what the National Council for the Social Studies means when it talks about core democratic values for elementary students. But all those core democratic values are called from the Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the US Constitution. In fact, if I was going to run even further, and I'm going to end on this note, and this is where I'm going to sell you a car because I have to talk very quickly. Abraham Lincoln. July 10th, 1858, Lincoln is on the campaign trail. He's running for the Senate. And Abraham Lincoln is speaking 6 days after the 4th of July. And Lincoln speaking to an audience that wants to know what his views are on various subjects. And Lincoln is saying to them in this speech, which we call the electric cord speech, Lincoln is going to try to answer this question about who is an American. If you don't teach this speech, if you're not familiar with this speech, if you've never seen this speech before, now you are. Because listen to what Lincoln says. We have, besides these men, descended by blood from our ancestors, among us perhaps half our people who are not what? At all of these men, they are men who came from German, Irish, French, and Scandinavian. Men that have come from Europe themselves or whose ancestors have come hither and settled here, finding themselves our equal in all things. Whoa. You mean this is not a new conversation, Dr. Williams? You mean you're not being political? You mean you're not talking about what's happening now? You mean that this actually goes way back and that this is an invitation to think through what Lincoln just said there? Because he's like, oh, it doesn't have to be by birth. In fact, Lincoln's going to go one step further. He says, if they look back through this history to trace their connection with those days by blood, they find they have. They cannot carry themselves back into the glorious epoch and make themselves feel they are part of. But, let me just be clear, but's a really tricky preposition. Anything that comes after the but ain't generally isn't in your interest. Well, you can get this car for $35,000, but uh-oh. I'll marry you, but uh-oh. But, listen to him, I love this, but when they look through the old Declaration of Independence, they find that those old men say, we hold these truths that all men are created equal, and they feel that moral sentiment taught in that day evidences their relation to those men. And that is the father of all moral principle in them. And they have help me, to claim it as though they were, and of the men who wrote that declaration, and this is Lincoln's electric cord speech. He concludes, that is in that declaration that links the heart of patriotic and liberty-loving men together, that will link those patriotic hearts as long as the love of freedom exists in the minds of men throughout the world. So you mean Lincoln's in conversation with John Lewis and they're both talking about a global vision of democracy and democratic practice? You mean this isn't a... Look, if I lost you, and I apologize because I got no time left because I got to run through this very quickly. I talk about the paradox, I won't. I talk about the contradiction, I won't. I would do that, but I won't. But I will go to Dred Scott, because you know who Lincoln left out? Black folks. Dred Scott has decided the year before. Lincoln ain't touching that. He's doing a little bit of what we saw with the Fannie Lou Hamer, Bob and Weave. I'm sorry, I said Fannie Lou Hamer, but I meant Harriet Tubman. Aren't I a woman? Sojourner Truth. I ain't putting that in there, right? I want to make this case, but that might be a bridge too far. So I want to go to somebody else who's also trying to answer that question in that moment. You teach it, Roger Taney. Roger Taney and Lincoln are in conversation in 1857 and 1858 about who belongs, who participates, and who gets to tell the story. Roger Taney, for Dred and Harriet Scott, says, nah. In fact, he goes through this whole thing, you guys know it because you teach it, where Taney says, the men who framed this declaration were great men, high in literary requirements, high in their sense of honor, and incapable of asserting principles inconsistent upon those in which they were acting. Really? No, my friends, because you spend 3 days here walking in the streets and you understand this perhaps in a way intimately today that probably resonates in a way now that's really powerful. Follow me, my friends. Follow me, follow me, follow me. I know I'm out of time, but just give me a minute. They perfectly understood the meaning of the language they used and how it would be understood by others. Then why is Lincoln having that conversation a year before and trying to see people into that dialogue? Everybody follow me here? Concludes my favorite part. And they knew it would not in any part of the civilized world be supposed to embrace the Negro race, which by common consent had been excluded from civilized governments and the family of nations and doomed to slavery. It's interesting that he's making that case, but you know what we don't teach about about Dred Scott? There's a dissent. There are actually two dissenters. One of them is Benjamin Curtis. What does Benjamin Curtis say in that dissent? I can find nothing in the Constitution which deprives of their citizenship any class of persons who were citizens of the United States at the time of its adoption or who should be native-born citizens of it. That's the 14th Amendment, my friends, and that's happening in this debate before the 14th Amendment is adopted, and I'm saying all this to you because that's fundamentally a we the people issue. That's fundamentally, if we think about the 14th Amendment, so much of U.S. history bottoms on that, but it goes back to this language, those three words, we the people. Who? They not like us, but they are, says Lincoln. They not us. They not like us, but they are, says Dred Scott. They not like us, but they are, says Harriet Beecher Stowe, says Martin Luther King. My friends, I don't have to say anything else, but if you see it, you see it. Nearly every major civil rights struggle since Reconstruction runs through that language. And that language is all about addressing the fatal defect that you find in this. We weren't very clear about who the hell we were talking about. Look, because I don't have time, I'm going to run through this very quickly. Gee, this would have been fun. You're missing out on so much great stuff. I'm doing this on purpose. West Virginia had you, whoop, whoop. Virginia had you, yep, had you all. You're not getting any of it. You're going to have to read through the PowerPoint. I don't even feel bad for you. Ha, ha, ha. I'm going to go here to the educator very quickly. There's Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, school teacher, May 66. She's going to try to answer this question. When the black woman weighs in, she weighs in with an authority that says, and now women, white women in particular, are running away from the Civil War amendments because they weren't included. And Frances Ellen Watkins Harper in a speech from 1866 says, May, we are all bound up together. I do not believe that giving a woman a ballot is immediately going to cure all the ills of. I do not believe that white women are a dewdrops just to hail from the skies. I think that like men, they may be divided into three classes. I love this for students. They, like all of us, may be divided into three classes: the good, the bad, and the indifferent. The good would vote according to their convictions and principles. The bad is dictated by prejudice or malice, and the indifferent will vote on the strongest side of the question with the winning party. I'm out of time. All right, so let me end on this point. Hold on. I'm gonna show you one cartoon and I'll let you go. Y'all clapping for me because you want me to sit down. I'm gonna show my cartoon, damn it. Last one, just very quickly, and you'll be able to do this. This is from 1869, it's Uncle Sam's Thanksgiving. I'm not gonna be able to close the arc on this, but I just wanna point out that in that conversation between Lincoln and Taney, and in what I just read to you from Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, here's Thomas Nast. We all teach us cartoons. Come one, come all, Uncle Sam's Thanksgiving. Who's around the table? That looks a lot like 1942. It looks a lot like 1986. And it's not happening in 1942 and 1980. It's happening in 1869. What's the centerpiece? Self-government and universal suffrage. Who's serving the meal? Thaddeus Stevens. But who's on the wall? Washington, Lincoln, Grant. And the most important part, again, as I look at this is, it's a powerful way to invite students into that conversation, to recognize that no matter what we're seeing in other aspects of our society and culture in this moment, there's abundant stuff that, see Hawaii, I had y'all too. I had everybody represented. I did my homework. Too bad you're not gonna get to it. I love you very much. Thank you.